I'm passionate about community, and I am so privileged to have been here today with all of these other very auspicious guests who have been talking about their passion for community, their passion for people, their passion for connecting. And of course, I'm passionate about community because I'm passionate about connecting, and I'm passionate about people. And oddly enough, communities are made up of people. People are fascinating, don't you think? Don't you think people are just the most fascinating creatures that have ever existed? I mean, look around you. Look at the people sitting next to you and behind you and in front of you. Aren't they just fascinating? Don't you just want to know more about them and know their stories and figure out what they're thinking besides, you got a little something right there. And It's fascinating stuff. And you know, when we talk about community, we sometimes talk about communities as groups of people that have gathered around a certain activity or ideology, like the religious community or the business community or the nonprofit community or an ethnic community. And we group people in communities based on ideologies or activities or issues. And I'm particularly fascinated by geographical communities or municipalities because all of those communities are represented within that geographical community. All those different ideologies and values and ideas, as we heard earlier, all living together in close proximity to one another. And so I wonder, how do you work with a group of people like that, all those diversities, and actually mobilize your community to find common ground and find common values and figure out how we can do things together to have community capacity and resilience and address issues and do stuff? How do we decide what we want to do together when we have all these different diversities? So it's really a fascinating story. I grew up in Edmonton, but I have lived in several typical Alberta communities like this one. Okay, that's actually the Antarctic, but you get the picture. I mean, let's face it, you know, for much of the year, we kind of feel like that typifies our experience in Alberta, and that's another issue that kind of keeps us from connecting sometimes, right? I mean, we typically go to our houses and hunker down for the winter and just don't connect with each other because it's cold out. So how do we move beyond that? And how do we say, well, these are all the elements that are impacting me and dissuading me from being able to connect? But how do we make a purposeful choice that changes that and gets us out of that and gets us connected to one another? And why? Well, for myself, one of the other things I'm passionate about is living with intention rather than living out of habit. And I think that I want to live life. I don't want life to live me. I want to purposefully and deliberately figure out who I am, address every single issue inside of me, tear it apart, examine it, figure out if it's good, bad, or indifferent, decide what my values are, and be an influence and an inspiration to others, and to walk out my life based on my values and convictions. And I want to connect with people, and I want people to be inspired to live that way too. And if we can decide to live by intention rather than letting life live us and living out of habit, I think we can really get somewhere with all of those groups of people in community and develop common ground and common culture, even with a diversity of cultures. So when we talk about culture, culture is defined in many ways, and we had a lot of discussion about culture earlier this morning. And this may not be the type of culture that you had expected to think about today, but you know, all those different petri dishes growing different kinds of bacteria, I like the idea of culture being infectious. Culture is infectious when you think about it. If you went to prison, let's say, there's a pretty negative culture in prison, would you agree? Well, okay, if you didn't have a strong sense of who you were, what your values are, what you stood for, and a conviction to every day live out of your values and out of what moves you and what inspires you, would you agree that the atmosphere of prison would eventually or soon have a real significant impact on you as a person. That culture would invade you, your heart, mind, spirit, and your behavior would change, your thinking would change, and you would come out of prison changed, and probably not for the better. Conversely, if you were to go into a really positive culture, and let's say you didn't have a strong sense of who you were, and you were just forming ideas about the world and yourself and others and how things work, and you were in a really supportive, healthy, accepting environment, and you were there long enough, would that not have an impact on your values and on how you felt about yourself? So we can decide that in community, we can create a culture, and that's my idea, that we can create a culture in community that actually people can grab onto and have a more positive life because they've been part of our community. I first got interested in this idea, and I'm going to use a case study from my very own community, the town of Penhold. I used to work in community development in the town of Penhold, and although I still live there, I don't work in community development any longer. I serve on council still now in the community, and one of the reasons that I quit doing community development and ran for council was because I really wanted this idea of community identity and community culture to be addressed at the leadership level. I believe that leadership needs to take the horns of responsibility for driving and infusing community culture. So Penhold is a bedroom community, as you know, which means that most of the grown-ups don't work in the community. They drive off to go to work. But we do have schools in the community, so the kids are in the community going to school. And if the parents go from work to bingo, oftentimes the kids are in the community for much or most or all of the day without very much adult influence in their lives. So I had all kinds of parents coming to me when I was working in community development and saying, we got to do something. Something is really wrong. We are struggling with substance abuse and bullying in our community. And our kids are just really, really struggling. And these two issues are just rampant in our community. What can we do? We realized that everybody was sort of leaving it to the school to look after. Well, the school can look after it. Well, the school can't look after it. They're only there for a certain portion of the day. We realized we needed a community response. And so we started having community meetings. And it was a very interesting thing that happened because in one of the community meetings, I asked the adults in the room, how many of you think that if a young person or a child came to you and asked for meaningful help, saying, I'm really struggling, like I'm being offered drugs, or I'm being bullied, or I'm really angry and I'm out of control and I'm engaging in bullying behavior. Can you please help me? How many adults think that they would help a child in that way? Well, virtually every adult in the room put up their hands. So then I asked the young people, there were about 15 young people in the room, and I asked them, how many of you think if you asked an adult for help that you would get meaningful help? One out of 15 young people. So do you see the disparity? The adults thought, we got a good community, we're supportive, we love these kids, it's all good, what? And the kids thought, we are alone, and we are just at the will of these negative forces that are wreaking havoc in our community. How can we deal with this disparity of perceptions, and how could we develop a response to change that culture in our community? So in the course of our research and trying to figure out what to do, we ran across some research by a fellow by the name of Dr. Martin Brokenleg. And he is a preeminent researcher and author, speaker, in working with First Nations youth. And in his research, he had discovered and developed a strategy called the Circle of Courage. And he believes that 4 key resiliencies are needed in every young person in order for them to thrive and be successful in life and to grow up with strong, positive values. And you can see those there on the screen. He had done a very interesting study of a group of young people in care. And he wondered why some of these young people that grew up in care with just all of them had tremendous obstacles and bad things had happened to them. Some of them grew up and fell into addictions and crime and mental health issues and physical health issues. underemployed or unemployed, and some of the other kids grew up to be healthy and successful and have families and be educated and well-adjusted. And he wondered what the difference was. And in the course of his research, he found that the difference for the successful group versus those that struggled was the presence of a strong, healthy adult-child relationship, a mentor. The kids that did well had a mentor. And so we realized in our community response that we had to figure out a way to have strong, healthy adult-child relationships in our community. We needed to purposefully design a culture that would embrace our kids and help them to grow up in making good choices. If we could create a supportive culture that was so healthy and accepting that kids would naturally gravitate towards positive choices and not be inclined to engage in destructive behavior, what would our community look like in 20 years? What kind of kids would grow up in our community? What would they be able to do? And so we sat down and decided we needed to figure out what our values were going to be. And through a process that was lengthy and very interesting and inspiring for me, we came up with our community values. Penhold shares. Penhold is supportive, healthy, accepting, responsible, ever active, and safe. That's our vision for our community. Those are the values that we believe that we as a community have, and we just need to deliberately and actively infuse and inject those values into our community. So how do we do that? Well, we developed a one-page tool that everybody in the community could use in planning programs, events, and activities to make sure that they were including those values in their activities. And then they could evaluate and reflect on those things afterwards. So we are still in progress, obviously. It's not a fait accompli. We haven't arrived. And we're not the worst community that ever lived. We're just a community that decided we had issues and we wanted to do something about them. So my question to you today is, I'd like you to imagine with me what could happen in your community. What would happen if everybody in your community got together, if you could get all the key stakeholders, and in your municipality, from the street sweeper to the mayor, they were making decisions bearing in mind your values. They could say them, they could repeat them back, they knew what it meant, and they knew how to infuse the culture and values into the decisions that they made in their everyday life. What if schools and teachers and churches and businesses and community groups and families and seniors and singles were all working together, singing from the same song sheet to infuse culture into your community? What do you think could happen in your community? What would your community look like? I challenge you today to live by intention and not by habit, and go back to your community and discuss this idea of how you can infuse culture. I want to do my part to impact my community with the values and cultures that I believe are important for successful, healthy people and a successful, healthy community, and I challenge you to do the same. Thank you very much.